Hey Chris, good seeing you again.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to thank you for helping me chop wood the other day.
Hey, no problem. Whatever I can do to help you, man. Anyway, can I ask you a question about your business?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, what are your? Do you think you can grow your business in a down economy like this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it is pretty scary.
Yeah, definitely. It's so. The question is, are you taking any steps to actually do something?
Well, I thought about building a website or doing some online advertising or something like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea because there's a lot of money made to be made online. But there is one thing you got to watch out for. That is, a lot of people, they will actually go build a website and they get all excited about this website that they got built. But the problem is the website sits there gathering dust on the internet and nobody visits it because they don't. And when somebody actually does visit it, they can't sell anything because you got to sell. Because if you don't sell on your website and don't set it up to sell, your website might as well not even have one. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, but how do I make a website that sells someone?
Well, first of all, you got only a couple seconds. When somebody visits your website, you only have a couple seconds to get their attention. And so you have to have some kind of big thing to get their attention, a picture or something. So it gets their attention, and then you got to go and you got to build their trust. It's all about really building trust with that person. And a good way to do that is, talk about different people, stories about how you've helped somebody else, or testimonials, or maybe give them something for free or something that builds trust that way. And then you get them to really desire your product. You tell them all about your product, about what you have to offer. You got even the little minor details that a lot of people don't really think about when they think about their own business. You got to include those because your customers want to know about them. Even though they don't tell you they want to know about them, they really do. So you got to include all those details, and then you ask them to order. And that's pretty much how it works. Now, why don't I just help you build a website, and I will help you set it up so that it sells. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks.
Sweet! We're watching the Wizive
So
show.
last week we talked about being a light in the darkness and letting the light that God put inside of you out. And right now, just before I'm talking here, you saw me selling Kristin and buying a website from me.
And I'm going to go through that a little bit, and I'm going to share with you how that is actually kind of the same way that we need to witness to people, and how we can let our light shine to get people to see Christ and to understand what salvation is all about and what God is all about and what Jesus is all about, and so that they can put their faith and trust in Jesus as well. See, that's kind of our mission. That's our ultimate goal in a way. So anyway, let's just go back a little bit, and we'll see how we can do here as far as trying to really witness to people about Jesus. And first of all, as you noticed in the first thing that I did, when I was talking to Chris, and I was, asked him how I was doing, and he thanked me for coming out and chopping wood for him. See, what I did right there is beforehand, I was talking to him, and I helped him chop some wood, and I built trust with him. I gave him a reason that I could tell him about his business. I could talk to him about his business. I did something with him that made him trust me, so that I could go out and witness about my business to him, about building a website and building it correctly, because that's kind of what I do actually. But anyway, in prison crusades, there was one thing I've learned is that when you go up to an inmate, the first thing to do is not always to tell them they're going to hell or something, but to just simply start talking to them. How are you doing? How's your day? I'm sure it's kind of maybe a little bit bad, being in prison and everything, but how's your day? Just talk to them about what's going on lately. What have you been up to lately? As far as, are you reading any books or something like that, or just to relate to them a little bit and talk to them, and they start trusting you. And in prison, they automatically kind of trust you when you actually just go in there. But out here in the real world, as to say, you need to go up and you need to build trust with somebody. So when you're wherever you are and you feel like you should witness to this one person, go up and you just start talking to them about their day, about what they're up to, what they do, or what work they do, and all this. Just talk about a little bit anything. and it builds trust with them, and they'll start trusting you a little bit. The next, you want to ask them, what about when you're witnessing someone, you want to ask them, there's kind of like two questions that you want to ask them. First of all is, if you died tonight, would you go to heaven? And most people are going to answer, you're going to be say like, well, yeah, I'd say I'd go to heaven. I mean, yeah, because I'm a good person and stuff. And so then you ask the second question, which is, if you did actually die tonight, and you stood before God on Judgment Day, and you stood before God, and He'd ask you, why should I let you into my kingdom? What are you going to tell Him? And see, this is all once you've already built trust. So you're going into the thing of, how are you going to get to heaven? You want to go to heaven, but how are you going to get there? And so so you'll know exactly what they believe in. See, some people will say, yes, I'll go to heaven, but then they'll say, because all the good things I've done. But then you'll be able to say, wait a second here. All the good things you've done, so being good gets you to heaven, but what about the sin that you've done? Because, the Ten Commandments and everything in the Bible, that's God's perfect law. And if you break any of that, you're going against God, because you know who God is? He's just. And then you got to explain to them, once they answer that question, the second question, how they're going to get into heaven, then you got to explain to them, what they think is flawed, or if they're born again, then hug them and talk about Christ and uplift that person, which I've done that too. But you got to share with them the truth, because they need to know the truth. They need to know that they're going to hell if they are just relying on their good works to get them into heaven, because it's not going to happen, and they need to know that. So you're their friend. You're the person that's going to tell them this. And so when you tell them this, you can't be afraid to kind of. Sometimes I had this feeling, well, I don't really want to tell people they're going to hell because I'm afraid I'll offend them or something. The thing is, if you don't offend them, they're just still going to go to hell. So you got to sometimes you just got to go say something. And the thing about it is, when you witness somebody, the first thing is, beforehand, before you even go out to talk to anybody about anything, you need to know what you're talking about. You need to know what salvation is. You need to know how to answer the tough questions that people are going to ask you. You need to know how to give examples of those tough questions. You need to know all this stuff, so that you got to know about salvation, how salvation works. You got to know how that we're born into sin, and that God is just, and He can't tolerate sin, but He's also merciful. So He sent His Son down to die on the cross for our sins as the ultimate sacrifice, and that's what salvation is. And you got to know all those. You got to know exactly how that works. You got to know how they need to put their faith in God so that they can be saved, so that they can actually go to heaven, because they want to go to heaven. And you got to relate to them and be honest with them and be upfront with them when you talk about it. You got to believe in what you're talking about. That's a big thing. A lot of people, they don't quite know what they're talking about, so they're not very confident when they go up and talk to somebody. Which actually in 1 Corinthians Paul talks about, I didn't come in my own confidence, but I came in with Jesus Christ, just sharing Jesus Christ. I came as weak. And that's the actual thing. That's the main thing to witnessing to somebody, is letting the God inside you, like I talked about in the last episode, letting Him out. So that's how to witness. Now I can teach you different steps to witness and how I do it, but the main thing that I do is I let God do the talking. I let God come out of me, and I don't do it in my own understanding, because it doesn't work. I tried that and it did not work. So when you're witnessing, you got to let God out. That's as simple as it is. You got to let the light that God put inside of you out, and so that you can be a really good witness. So that's the main thing I want you to take away from this. And as you're talking to somebody, share stories about how God has worked in your life. Talk about different things that God has done for you, and they will see those stories and understand different stuff, or use parables as far as helping them understand something. Like one thing that I've used a lot is talking about, if you were in front of the judge, I'm usually in prison ministry, so I'm going to talk about how I talk to a prisoner. If you were in front of the judge, when you right before you got sentenced to be in prison, and let's say that judge is honest, so he's going to, if you rape somebody, if he's a just judge, he is going to give you punishment. And so this judge gives you this punishment, but then somebody steps up and like, let me take his punishment for him. See, that's in the good story that I use about how a judge is just, but then there's Jesus came up and took our punishment for us. Because of God's mercy, He let that happen. He made that happen. He predestined that to happen so that we could be saved. So, anyway, go out and be a witness. That's pretty much what. Go talk to people. You got to go talk to people. I said in the last episode, you need to go up and talk to them. Now, there's a way to do it. You got to build trust. You got to get them to answer the questions that I talked about. Then one of the most important things, once you explained everything, how salvation works and everything, you got to ask them another question. That is, why wouldn't you want to give your life to Christ right now? It's a hard question to ask, but you need to ask it. Because if I can, like for the example beforehand, if I wouldn't have asked Kristin, why don't I build your website for you and make it sell for you, then he would have never said yes. You got to ask the question to make the actual, to help people to make that decision. So ask the question and go out and be a witness. And remember, it's not about you, it's not about what you know. Yeah, there's different tactics I can teach you, as I said, but it's about letting God within you out. So anyway, go out and witness, and in the comment section below, write some things down that makes you afraid to witness.
Okay guys, the WizLife goal for today is WizLife goal number 30, and that is to create trust to share Christ. You first need to create trust, and the verse that I have that goes along with that is 1 Corinthians 9:22-23. This is Paul writing to the Corinthians, and this is what he says: "To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. So I do all things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it." See, it's pretty simple. He created trust with the weak, so he became weak like them. He became like them, and he created trust before to share the gospel so that he could win some. We need to do the same thing. We need to become like that person in some way, to relate to that person in some way, to build trust with that person before we share Christ, so that when we share Christ, we'll be able to save more than if we don't create trust in the beginning. So go out there and create trust and share Christ. That's what it's all about.
This is the part of the show where we share with you the biblical joke of the week. And it's usually, as always, a little bit funny and a little bit lame.
Okay, the joke for the day, the biblical joke, I got it myself because nobody submitted one, so please submit your jokes. But here's how it goes. It's pretty funny here. A Jewish businessman in Chicago sent his son to Israel for a year to absorb the culture. When the son returned, he said, "Papa, I had a great time in Israel. By the way, I converted to Christianity." "Oh no," said his father. "What have I done?" He took his problem to his best friend. "Ike," he said, "I sent my son to Israel and he came home a Christian. What can I do?" "Funny you should ask," said Ike. "I too sent my son to Israel, and he came home a Christian also. Perhaps we should go see the rabbi." They explained their problem to the rabbi. "Funny you should ask," said the rabbi. "I too sent my son to Israel, and he came home a Christian. What is happening to our young people?" So they prayed, telling the Lord about their sons. As they finished their prayer, a voice came from the heavens. "Funny you should ask," said the voice. "I too sent my son to Israel."
I need you to submit your biblical joke so that I can have it on the show. Now, how to do that? Well, you can either go to wizlife.com and contact me, or you can go to YouTube and create a video response.
This has been the WizLife Show. My name, as always, is Justin Miller, and I'm out.